I am really pleased to see representatives of different groups and different entities. The report that will be issued will be an integrated report representing all groups, and in the end, we will read to you a synopsis, and it is a preliminary draft. This evening, it will be sent to you this evening, and you will be given the chance to give your feedback and opinion on the draft, the same way we did it last year in Morocco. So we will read the synopsis or the summary of the sessions. Karima, our colleague, is in charge, is the head of the ASQA unit concerned with Agenda 2030. She and her team has provided all needed support and coordinated not only within the teams of the ASQA, but also between the UN agencies and the League of Arab States. Mrs. Karima will be presenting the first part, and then Mrs. Muna Fattah will, the officer in charge of Sustainable Development Affairs, will be reading the second part. Mrs. Karima will be reading the part related to the resources, the water resources, and the integration of natural resources, and then the voluntary reviews, the national voluntary reviews. Then Mrs. Fattah will be talking about the integration of natural resources in development planning to ensure more resilience in the future, water and the SDGs from an Arab perspective, the environment, natural resources, and their role in ensuring integration, sustainable energy, and transformation towards sustainable and resilient societies. Then Mrs. Mulden will be talking about revisiting economic diversification to preserve the lives of the future generations and their livelihoods, the financing inclusive and sustainable development in the Arab region, and Mrs. Muna Fattah will be concluding with the planning for sustainable and resilient cities, localization of sustainable development goals, and then Mrs. Karima will be talking about the civil society and the sustainable development in the Arab region, gender equality, gender mainstreaming, and building the capacities and enabling women in national plans to implement sustainable development goals, empowering the youth, the transformation towards sustainable societies, leaving no one behind within the framework of the Agenda 2030. Let's start with Mrs. Karima, then Mrs. Muna Hania, followed by Muna Karima, followed by the closing session with the Secretary Executive, Dr. Hakim, to close the proceedings of the session. Mrs. Karima, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Khawla. At the outset, allow me to thank every party who has contributed to the preparation of this draft of the key messages. Allow me to thank the team who made sure to cover all the topics that were raised in the forum. We have introduced chapters based on the titles of the sessions, but in the final draft, we might be merging some of the headlines based on the logical order. Allow me first to start with the Arab countries' perspectives on integrated development planning and transformative change. You know that sustainable development is based on the right to development and the responsibility of civil society towards cultural change that builds a sustainable development integrated project. And educational reform is a main prelude to enhance the human capital and keep up with international transformations and build diversified and varied economy based on innovation and knowledge. Achieving the ambitions of Agenda 2030 requires development plans based on comprehensive visions that takes into consideration the interlinkages and the interlinked visions, taking into consideration all time frames. These plans should be flexible and should be able to be adapted based on emergent needs, nationally and regionally. Cooperation and coordination within governments and within institutional governments is one of the main challenges faced by national governments in terms of implementing Agenda 2030. In view of the interlinkages between the SDGs, there is a need to raise awareness, to unify concepts and discourses, to make sure that we work interactively with the agenda and consider it as a project for all. You know that the region has so many challenges. We know that what cannot be measured cannot be perceived as a progress. So as a main priority, there is a need to identify measurements for the goals and targets. We cannot speak of sustainable development without foundations of democracy and true political participation, including reinforcing the roles of political parties, civil society organizations, academic circles, media. Governance that is based on participation and transparency and accountability leads to the involvement of everyone in the process of development. The principle of leaving no one behind is one of the most important challenges facing the Arab region, especially vulnerable groups and people living in rural and peripheral areas. Therefore, we need to work on raising local awareness, involving local councils and local communities in setting priorities, planning, implementation, follow-up, making sure that everyone benefits from the returns of development. Security and political challenges are the main hindrances to sustainable development in the Arab region. Given the transnational impact of conflicts, we need to focus on reinforcing peace and reconstructing and rehabilitating the hit countries and support the sustainable development approaches in those countries hit by war and displacement. Those particular countries have difficulties in setting long-term development plans. Therefore, we need to adopt timely and phased development plans taking into consideration all social and economic aspects, making sure that everyone is involved in order to enhance social fabric and lead to social reconciliation. We cannot speak about sustainable development in our region without focusing on the regional aspect and dimension and the need to reinforce cooperation and coordination between the different countries. A number of development issues are cross boundaries and they cross the borders and they are transnational, and that takes us to the brain drain, which is a challenge to all. These common challenges require a true regional partnership that leads to supporting the countries that are most hit by conflicts. That is regarding the first topic. On the VNRs, we need to remind ourselves that those reviews are extremely important, and maybe they are the most important stage of our work, but they are not an end per se. They are an opportunity to understand achievements, identify gaps and shortcomings, and rectify the future course. The VNR is not only a mechanism to follow up on national development efforts. It is an incentive for long-term participation and work. It is also a tool to redesign the roles of partners and institutionalize the mechanisms of cooperation. We need to reassert the importance that governments include all stakeholders, including civil society organizations, parliament, parliamentarians and the experts in the different phases of preparing the voluntary national reviews, i.e. starting with the collection of data, drafting, not only at the level, not only involve them at the final drafting stage. Also, amongst the challenges facing the VNRs, the discrepancy in understanding sustainable development plans and the discrepancies between the different ministries. The experiences of the countries have proven that we need to enhance this knowledge and enhance this awareness at the national levels. Also, one of the main conditions for alignment at an institutional level is to build on the existing frameworks, restructure them, and build the capacities of the already existing cadres instead of building new parallel institutions and frameworks. Alignment at the level of the priorities should be based on the targets, and this work should be because targets are more accurate and more precise. Also, there is a need to reinforce the work of the data-producing entities and enhance the statistical efforts in a way that goes in compliance with international efforts to activate the work of reviews. Also, there is a need to adopt methodologies to assess the impact of policies. The Arab parliaments have an important role in following up on the implementation of Agenda 2030. The control and supervisory role of the Arab parliaments should be enhanced through the sensitization on development plans and programs and the review process, and by developing the control mechanism over the parliamentarian work through questionnaires, parliamentary commissions, and other tools. Also, we need to reinforce and emphasize the role of volunteers in the development process and in the preparation of the VNRs, especially when it comes to collection of data. Those are the closest to the field, to the ground in the different sectors. We also need to emphasize the role of the Arab Forum for Sustainable Development as a space to exchange experiences, lessons, and benefit from the knowledge that has started to be built since 2006, and to benefit from the manuals and the guides on how to prepare national reviews that was actually distributed to you, and benefit from all other available tools.
مساء الخير. بالنسبة
Good evening. On integrating natural resources in development planning for future resilience, the forum sees the following. Sustainable development as an issue is mainly contingent upon the political will in the country, and it requires an effective partnership between the private and public sectors, and raising the awareness of the people and focus on the priorities and the challenges facing natural resources, especially the increasing demand based on the increased demographic levels and the forced displacement. This impacts on food security, the energy security. We need to take into consideration the need to make them sustainable for the future generations. We need to work towards adopting transformative, comprehensive national policies, and focus on stopping squandering, rationalizing the use of natural resources, support vocational training in the sectors of water, food, and energy. There is a need as well to find effective mechanisms to support cooperation and dialogue between the Arab countries on a number of vital issues related to natural resources, especially those that are common amongst countries. We need as well to support the partnerships and the common action plans between the Arab region, and there is a need as well to cooperate and on actually reconstruction projects that are based on renewable energy and sustainable projects. We need as well to use energy as a prelude, as an introduction to peace, and to generating public good. We need to involve youth groups in policy making and accountability when it comes to issues of sustainable development. We need to reiterate that sustainable management of natural resources means the sovereignty over one's natural resources, and we specifically stop at Palestine and its compromised situation at this level. There is a need to emphasize sovereignty. We need to call upon the United Nations and its members in order to reinforce the dialogues on Arab countries' sovereignty over their own natural resources. There is a need as well to build a systematic relationship between between the academic circles and the scholars in its different dimensions. Human sciences and vital and life sciences. We need to build those linkages. We call also for building an Arab platform for energy and water, and support it with the needed tools in order to find ways and to propose sustainable water and energy projects. We need to propose practical recommendations to the national and regional decision makers at that stake. Now, on the Arab perspective, the Arab countries' perspective for sustainable development, we need to resensitize on leaving no one behind. We need to adopt policies that stop the squandering of water and the usage and the wrong usage of waters that cross borders. We need to reinforce those efforts to overcome scarcity of water and couple these efforts with required indexes and indicators, specifically an indicator on SDG 6.4. It's highly important to showcase the linkages between the different sustainable development goals. Water is essential for food security, for protection of health, for support of cities, and for sustainable ecosystems, and the preservation of energy sources and peace building. Also, we need to make sure that human beings have the right to water and to sanitation, in addition to having the right legal frameworks to secure these rights. We need to focus on scientific research to support the efforts towards implementation of water-related sustainable development goals, including innovative energies that support non-traditional water sources in the Arab region. We need to focus on the importance of participation of everyone, the partnerships of all, between all partnerships, and be ready for any natural disaster in terms of floods specifically. On environment, natural resources, and their role in integration, we need to call upon every stakeholder to stand up to the phenomenon of accelerated urban urban planning and the urban cities proliferation. This is a danger. This is an extremely dangerous risk. We need to provide an integrated schemes to the management of natural resources, because we notice the weakened mechanisms to stand up to land uses. We need to take into consideration the strategic environmental planning as a main pillar, as a main mechanism to guarantee the preservation of biodiversity and the good management of natural resources. Since environmental issues and natural resources are across borders, we need to emphasize the principle of partnerships and cooperations in addressing these issues, especially when it comes to those SDGs that are related directly or indirectly to natural resources. We need to focus on the mechanisms of implementation, and these include the need to reinforce innovative partnerships between sectors including the the PPPs, and reinforce the role of financial cooperations in supporting countries to implement sustainable development goals, especially when it comes to natural resource and creating a green sustainable economy. On sustainable energy and transformation towards resilient sustainable cities. The increasing needs of the Arab region in terms of energy are a challenge, but it also impact on other aspects, specifically food security and water security. Keeping the traditional business in terms of managing natural resources does not allow for sustainability. So all Arab economies should move towards sustainable energy sources. Also, integrated institutional frameworks should be adopted to spread the knowledge of renewable energy so that the Arab region is more inclined towards using sustainable energy sources. That requires more communication between the private sector and the government and the international financing cooperations, enhance the partnership between those different stakeholders, increase the work with scholars and the academic circles, and work more with civil society organizations. The renewable energy should be regarded and considered from a regional perspective and not from a unilateral or individual perspectives. That would lead to more efficient efforts.
We have to have a methodology based on rights in the developmental process and integrating gender equality as well as women empowerment and encouraging her on entrepreneurship and procedures and projects related to energy within the objectives and goals aiming at alleviating poverty, health and environment. We need to improve trade amongst the countries in the region as well as having local industries for clean energy and having networking linkages of networking amongst the Arab countries and having, for example, a common market for the Arab region for electricity as well as focusing on green passages. We have to invest financial support from the donor entities and international funding in the scope of projects and programs that are very clear that will allow the transformation towards a more sustainable energy resources as well as having profitable networks for all stakeholders in complete integration and coherence with the different countries that and the systems need to be in the countries sustainable themselves. Good evening. Regarding the main messages out of this forum regarding the reconsideration of economic diversification, they are as follows. Reiterating the importance of having a new methodology for sustainable development based on economic diversification, based on the challenges that the Arab countries are facing. A depletion in oil, water resources, and plantable or agricultural lands, and the importance of developing those systems for sustainable development through having economic policy reform, as well as having policies for developing a digital economy to have a growth of the private sector, specifically the SMEs, investing and attracting investments and focusing on having ecological security as well as social justice for human dignity. A reiteration of the importance of including big numbers of stakeholders to develop sustainable policies for sustainable development, specifically the civil society, the state, etc. The importance of having the Arab region benefit from the industrial revolution that up until now the region has been unable to benefit from that. And in order to do so, the Arab countries need more cooperation and integration that are regional in nature in order to improve and build the capacities and mobilize resources and efforts. Supporting the communication between policymakers on the one hand or decision makers on the one hand and experts on the other in order to reach the objectives and goals of sustainable development. Inviting or establishing a committee of Arab scientists that are of different expertise and different fields to provide advice to decision makers and policy makers, as well as having a reform for health education, reform of the educational systems in order to be able to move along with innovation as well as benefit from digital economy completely. The reiteration of the importance of raising awareness amongst the citizens about the concept of consumption and sustainable consumption and production, as well as improving and increasing the sense of ownership regarding natural resources and raising awareness about the daily behavior and patterns of behavior in order to keep those resources for the future generations. Improving innovation through having a complete national system for innovation through specific initiatives and new approaches in all sectors that are economic in order to initiate the role of SMEs and integrating those SMEs in the formal economy. As for the messages issued by the forum regarding financing comprehensive and sustainable development, they are as follows. Reiterating the importance of diversification of economy and including the private sector in the development process, where most of the countries in this region face a problem and a difficulty in providing financing to achieve sustainable development in light of the decrease of international assistance and rather focusing on humanitarian assistance and aid and stability as well as security, in addition to the economic fluctuations and the increase of debt in these donor entities, as well as the weakness of foreign trade that are governed by unjust rules and regulations. Reiterating the importance of regional and international networks to provide the needed funding, especially for the least developed countries in this region in order to achieve sustainable development. Reiterating the importance of providing financing to sustainability, and this will depend on the development of the economic system in order to improve and having a distribution of wealth, reform of the taxation system, as well as transforming and moving towards what we call a productive economy and not a consumer economy, as well as having a true partnership amongst the relevant stakeholders like banks, private sector, states, civil society, and international community. Reiterating the importance of initiating the role of the private sector in order to achieve sustainable development through providing the enabling environment for investment through adoption of laws, as well as performing the institutional reforms that are necessary, and to reiterate as well the adoption of criteria that govern the private sector based on transparency, responsibility, in order to have good governance of the private sector in its inclusion in the sustainable development process, as well as investing and including migrants in the development plans, and reiteration in the role of banks to to increase the trust and confidence of investors, especially in developmental projects. And for that, we need a number of procedures. For instance, initiatives to encourage the banks that fund development projects, as well as providing expertise and needed data so that the banks can evaluate and assess the profitability of developmental projects, as well as getting rid of financial illiteracy. A consensus on the adoption of a comprehensive system to fight corruption in order to reform the financial and economic systems, specifically in the Arab region, where we have the lowest rates of efforts deployed in order to fight corruption, and the need to develop the public budgets, as well as using international standards and criteria in doing so, as well as making them transparent and accountable, and promoting the transparency in the monitoring and follow-up of the budget in order to minimize corruption and waste, as well as developing the different bank-related laws to get back all that has been stolen, and to use that in developmental programs, and the importance of minimizing and mitigating negative impacts of abuse on the environment. And we have to conduct studies that will look at the environmental assessment impact or the environmental impact on of different projects, and we need to make sure that we bridge the gap, specifically when we look at regional as well as international experiences, when we look at the social corporate responsibility and the impact of that on the society as a whole and on development as a whole. And in this case, we might need to improve and collect data to exchange information and know-how. The necessity of moving from an informal economy that is a high presence in the Arab region towards a formalized economy. Regarding planning for sustainable cities, the forum considers that sound urban planning is based on common good and common interest, needing a framework to represent this. Thus, we can talk about the importance of mechanisms of representation that are comprehensive, that will guarantee that all the voices will be heard by decision makers, and including them in the debate, as well as reconsidering the laws and legislations that differentiate amongst the different classes and groups of citizens. The importance of reconstructing destroyed cities by wars in a sound and sustainable and integrated manner, and taking into consideration the needs of the displaced as well as minorities and marginalized groups, focusing at the same time on providing health and education services as well as other services in order to make sure there is social cohesion, and using in a positive manner the natural and ecological resources to activate the touristic sector. We need to come up with solutions that will look at we need to move away from having lands and territories as goods, but rather we need to look at the value. And the health of the human being in the city is related to different SDGs, and working towards healthy cities is based on a comprehensive system that includes all sectors and that necessitates a good participation that is enlightened in nature in order to clarify the ideas, come up with the priorities, monitor progress, reaching a social ownership. The decision makers need to come up with solutions and new techniques, as for example indices to measure poverty in the cities, and to adopt appropriate solutions according to the context. As for providing the local characteristic for SDGs in the Arab region, the forum welcomes the participation of the representatives of the local authorities for the Arab Forum for Sustainable Development as a promising plan to link between the national, local, regional, and international levels, and to raise awareness about the importance of local development in initiating the concept of not leaving anyone behind, and reiteration the importance of the local characteristic on the SDGs in the Arab region, as well as the role of cities and local societies in the follow-up process and in the process of regional considerations and holding accountable the state. And to achieve SDGs, we need to include the local authorities and the municipalities in the process of comprehensive developmental planning, and in having networking and partnerships amongst the municipalities themselves. The reiteration of the importance of the local authorities and municipalities adopting the 2030 agenda as well as the principles as a framework through which the priorities, goals, and objectives will be specified, taking into consideration national strategies and plans on the one hand, as well as demographic, geographic, social, and other considerations on the other hand. Coming up with institutional mechanisms that are appropriate for implementation and follow-up, and improving the partnership with the civil society organizations as well as the active individuals in the field of development. Working on mobilizing the financial resources needed in order to maintain the autonomy and independence of the local decision, and this necessitates a reconsideration of the laws that organize the budget situation and that govern the relationship between the local authority on the one hand and the donor entities on the other. Reiteration of the importance of having these cities for everyone, and urban planning processes thus need to be equal and need to be well planned, including the presence of refugees, migrants, and other vulnerable groups.
عفوا على هذه الملخص.
We apologize for this marathon. Now, regarding the civil society organizations and sustainable development in the Arab region, so this is what we heard in the civil society session. The adoption of the civil society organizations that took part in the meeting of the civil society organizations that was convened in Beirut on April 22, 23, with the outcomes and the recommendations. First, agreeing on having a platform for civil society organizations working in the Arab region that will be a regional mechanism that will reinforce the role of the civil society organizations and institutions in sustainable development and in following up of national plans, including the 2030 agenda, at the national and regional levels, as well as holding accountable the different states regarding these topics, and reiterating the importance of the role of the CSIs in order to talk about the importance of social justice as well as the human rights as a basis for having transformational change in the developmental in the sustainable development process in this region, the importance of having a higher ceiling for liberties and freedoms under which the civil society organizations work, as well as to support their capacities to empower them to have a real participation in the sustainable development process and policy making. Reiterating the importance of initiating principles of good governance as well as transparency, auto-auditing and supervision in governmental and non-governmental sectors, including the private sector and CSIs. The importance of institutionalizing the relationship between the public sector and the non-public sector in order to guarantee participation as well as consideration and deliberation and discussion of matters related to sustainable development. Having a participatory approach in drawing up budgets, following them up, monitoring them, considering that they are the main framework that will translate the different plans, developmental plans in every country. Considering mechanisms of choosing the different CSIs and CSOs, participating in the national plans, report preparation, as well as looking into a real participatory approach, making sure that these CSOs remain independent. Regarding the gender equality integration as well as women empowerment in the national plans to achieve SDGs. And the session, it was the 5th session, parallel session, 4th parallel sessions as the speaker. The importance of integrating gender equality in the national SD plans as well as sustainable development projects, specifically plans relevant to water, energy, economic or touristic and cities, in order to make sure that women and girls are not left behind and are not left out of the developmental process, taking into consideration their vulnerability and making sure that they need to have a voice in the 2030 agenda. The importance of integrating the gender equality in the national awareness raising reports that are submitted to the high-level political forum on sustainable development. The necessity of looking at the gender dimension and taking it into consideration in all ministerial decrees, legislations, draft laws, bills issued by cabinet, by governments based on the 2030 agenda. The importance of including the women in the decision-making process and the policy formulation in order to govern the good use of water resources, because we know that the women are usually more responsible than men in some countries in the Arab region, where women are responsible for a good management for water and energy at the level of the household. The necessity of having participatory audit and amongst or between the two genders, and including the women in the in the national plan, that will provide women with a voice to say what they might fear of in the planning, in the urban planning. And this will guarantee the economic and social participation of women. Working on the improvement of the quality, accurate or aggregate data regarding gender, as well as having accountability in order to make sure there is gender equality at all levels. Regarding the youth and the role of youth in the Arab region in moving towards sustainable societies. Welcoming and commending the participation, the good participation of the youth in the works of the Arab Forum Sustainable Development 2018 as a positive step towards including them as a main component in the implementation and achievement of the SDGs in the Arab region. And having an invitation to have a youth committee or council to take part in the discussions with the United Nations or within the United Nations at both regional and international levels, as well as making sure that the participation of the youth is very important at all levels, political, economic, even cultural, and making sure that we need to abide by the human rights system in all approaches towards the youth without marginalizing any of the vulnerable groups or already marginalized groups, making sure that we need to access youth in the rural areas specifically to guarantee equal opportunities for all. Reaching a consensus that a Security Council Resolution 252 related to youth security and stability in 5 elements, especially that of protection, is an essential framework today for the youth in the Arab region. Consequently, it is important to encourage countries to raise awareness of this resolution at all levels and beginning or opening up the discussions with the youth at the national and regional level. Reiterating the importance or making sure that everyone knows that youth are still away. The youth are still away from the political or decision-making process, knowing that they are a vital component in the 2030 agenda. And this is because of the absence of policies that will allow them to take part in the political process, and the youth themselves do not come forward. That is why we need to build a confidence between the youth and the state based on concepts of dimension of citizenship, liberty, and participation. The reiteration of the role of the household and the family as the main important democratic platform, being the first nucleus that builds the culture of participation. Building on the importance of building a legal system for youth where it focuses on protecting liberties, freedoms, as well as all rights for youth, including social, economic, and political rights. Working on developing the different educational curricula according to the international standards in order to come up with active citizens that will be empowered to take the initiative, where they will be the guiding force to reach the transformation we aspire. Saying that education, unemployment, and social justice are amongst the priorities of the youth, and they are topics that worry them. That is why we need to have radical reform in the economic structure of countries in order to come up with job opportunities for the youth of today and the youth of the future, in light of this demographic transformation and the increase in number of youth in the Arab region. The importance of taking part of the fourth industrial revolution, as well as new job opportunities, and working very quickly in order to harmonize the educational systems, as well as using technology in sciences, making sure that our approaches are innovative in order to come up with pioneering choices and options, as well as including the private sector in all of those deployed efforts. Specifying steps in order to come up with a regional network that will influence one way or another the decision-making process at the national and regional level, those decisions that are of interest to the youth, as well as focusing on different organizations that are led by the youth, encouraging networking to gain the needed capacities, as well as saying that the media, or making sure media is an important stakeholder supporting the youth. Thus, we need to have more interaction between the youth and the media need to raise awareness on the topics that are important of the youth, to encourage and invite the youth to look at ways to achieve SDGs. Regarding not leaving anyone behind, and in light of the Sustainable Development Plan 2030, making sure that no one is left behind as one of the main pillars of development plan for 2030. And this principle cannot be achieved unless we have integrated policies that are governed by the international law and that are governed by human rights standards. And this is to initiate the principle of not leaving anyone behind. And to do that, we need to get rid of discrimination in practices and laws, as well as spreading the culture of accepting the other, as well as making sure that our approaches are legal and inclusive, looking at the common good. Reiterating the importance of measurement as one of the components of developmental work, because when we measure progress and bridging the gaps will be done through monitoring those situations of those who are mostly vulnerable in our and marginalized in our society, taking into consideration the averages, the national averages, and coming up with indicators that will measure the impact of policies, national programs on the most marginalized groups. The necessity of adopting other methodologies in humanitarian and social sciences to define the societal groups that are marginalized and that are left behind, and monitoring those who fall outside the scope of statistical work, as well as making sure that no one is left behind. And development necessitates two parallel approaches. The first focuses on dealing with the structural causes and dynamics that generate poverty and marginalization, and this is done through public and comprehensive policies. The second approach has to do with the necessary procedures to be taken, as well as several or following policies and adopting policies that aim at dealing with the current problems.
شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you very much, Karima, Mona, Wahania.
لمدار من
This is a summary of what was done in the past 3 days, but this does not mean in any way that this is a closing. It is a draft, and it will be sent and we would like to have and listen to your opinions. If you see that there are some things that were not mentioned, some other things that need more clarification, etc. So this document will be sent, and we would like to listen to your comments and opinions on that document.
سيرسل في البريد الإلكتروني.
We will send them to you by email with a deadline to receive your comments and opinions. After that, we are obliged to send this document, put it in its final version, and the Lebanese Republic will submit it in the high-level political forum on behalf of the Arab region. So because of lack of time, we are obliged to ask you to send your comments and clarifications to on what has been read as quickly as possible. Will it be sent to member states only, or all the participants in this forum? All the participants, not only member states.
أستأذنكم إذا كان
If you have no further comment or clarification, I would like to call upon Dr. Mohammed Ali Al-Hakim, Under-Secretary General, Executive Secretary of UNESCO, to conclude this forum.
شكرا دكتورة خولة.
Thank you, Dr. Khawla. I promise that I will not take up more than 5 minutes of your time. Anyways, may the peace of God be upon you all. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear Assembly, allow me first and foremost to express ASQA's happiness to host the Arab Forum for Sustainable Development 2018 in Beirut. Under the sponsorship of His Excellency Prime Minister Mr. Saad Hariri of the Lebanese Republic, and in partnership with the League of Arab States, LAS, and our partners in the UN organization working in the Arab region. We conclude thus far the works of the Arab Forum for Sustainable Development after 3 days that constitute for our region an annual rendezvous that we meet, through which, in order to have a profound look at the pathway of our Arab region in terms of comprehensive sustainable development. This forum was a platform for dialogue and discussion, was even a roster for presentations that were highly valuable and fruitful. Despite the huge challenges that we grapple with, we still are highly optimistic with the future, and we recognize the force and strength of the Arab region with its human capital, whether men, women, and the nature as a whole. We were also able to concretely touch our deep and joint conviction that the just and inclusive sustainable development is a right to everyone, without exceptions. Therefore, it should be a right for all. Under the major headlines of this forum, we have discussed the importance of natural resources as a wealth of this region and a way to pave the floor to new priorities and policies in terms of sustainable development. These special sessions also created a certain impetus of new options and alternatives, and gave leeway to more consultation in practical solutions that will better gear the region towards a faster pace in order to reach major strides in the achievement of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. We were able to learn a lot on water resources, energy, patterns of production and consumption, as well as cities' ecological systems. These are all objectives that are being revisited this year at an international scale. Our knowledge of these factors better clarified the status quo of this region, and they should be framed within an international framework. The discussions also reasserted the importance of the fact that we cannot work on an implementation of a sustainable development agenda by the year 2030 in the Arab region in isolation of the regional status quo and the indicators that differentiate it from the rest of the world. The forum has raised numerous questions. Despite the ambitious efforts to find questions and solutions, I believe it is hard to find a good solution to all our challenges. Yet this forum remains a regional forum and platform and a success story. We have diverse Arab countries, and it's important to build trust and confidence amid all different governments, parliaments, civil society organizations, private sector, as well as regional, international organizations and academics, researchers, and mass media experts. And this will further bolster the sense of coordination and cooperation. The forum has showcased numerous steps that reaffirm the serious commitment by all member states or by all stakeholders on the concept of sustainable development. This forum also portrays that working towards sustainable development is no longer an option. It is a commitment. We need to change mindsets and we need to invest in technology and in innovation in order to make this paradigm shift. After listening to all of these presentations, ESCWA is honored to be linked to many of these projects that our organization had the pleasure modestly to deepen and reinforce. Our objective since the creation of this regional committee to work towards an economic and social development based on the UN Charter with the main objective of better servicing the populations of this region. Going onwards, after the partnership between ESCWA and the League of Arab States, as well as all of the other components of UN agencies working in this region, we reaffirm once again our commitment to stand side by side with the Arab countries in order to better transpose our breakthroughs to international fora and regional platforms. We furthermore ascertain standing side by side with the Arab countries that will present their national voluntary reports this year and in the future years, God willing. And we are there to provide the necessary consultation and assistance. Finally, I would like to extend my deepest thanks to the delegations of the countries represented by parliaments, governments, civil society and private sector, including the youth associations as well as the women associations. We would also like to extend our thanks to the researchers, experts and all those that partook to the works of this forum. We reassert once again our confidence in the Lebanese Republic, its government, its parliament, to convey the messages and recommendations of the Arab Forum for Sustainable Development to the high-level political forum to be held in July 2018. We wish His Excellency the Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri our deepest gratitude for sponsoring this forum and for supporting all the efforts of the government for the good success of this forum. We would like to thank you for participating to this forum. We would like to thank you for your active participation in all sessions. May the peace of God be upon you all. Thank you very much, Dr. Mohammed Ali Al-Hakim. Before I conclude, allow me to summarize this forum. I apologize for not being able to be with you before, but I was able to follow up on, thanks to the live streaming, what was going on. I dare say that it is better to work individually to learn how to work collectively, because such a collective and joint effort is a collective one, as Dr. Hakim mentioned. Our partners, the League of Arab States, the UN agencies, our partners, our colleagues within ESCWA, there is a unit responsible for the 2030 agenda. And it coordinated the work with all of these entities. On your behalf, I wish to extend our deepest thanks and gratitude to this unit and the staff working there. Thank you for your efforts. Thank you to all the colleagues that worked hardly. We'd also like to thank the interpreters. They have done an excellent work. I would like to thank the colleagues at the conference service. They were the ones who organized every single detail of this forum. We would like to thank also our colleagues from the Mass Media Corps, our security staff that provided protection and security and comfort to all participants. Let us not also forget the caterers and those who provided us with coffee and refreshments. Thank you very much. We shall meet next year, hopefully. We would like to thank you all. As promised, you will receive the documents, and we are looking forward to receiving your comments and feedback. May you return safely to your country. Thank you.